the village. Often it's much more cheaper from an economic perspective to disregard human lives. And because, as you consider, they work on a purely economic calculus, this often happens. And that's why they spend so much money covering this up. Last of all, we tell you that responsibility is very easily shifted. Because if you're going to have conflict in somewhere like Burma, and now China is an extra option, it doesn't have to veto. It can simply fund the Burmese junta to outpay the UN to ensure that these militias fight for them instead. Responsibilities become so transferable because there's no ideological dimension, a purely economic dimension, that you run massive risk. And for all these simple reasons, you say you go with this side of the house.
Thank the member of the opposition team and call the whip to the government bench.
It's sad. There's a couple of conflicts going on in Africa. One in Congo, one that in Burundi, etc. And one particularly horrific thing that caught my attention was the prostitution ring being run with 13, 14, 15-year-old girls. And these women were literally sold into sexual servitude, and they're really suffering, and they were really, literally, life was hell. Well, the sad part really was we couldn't even blame any of the warring armies because there's a bunch of UN soldiers running that way. That's the problem that was completely forgotten outside of the house. They come up here and say, well, we have a model that works. It doesn't, and we kept on telling you that. These people are not being protected. There's rampant corruption. There are endemic problems, and you keep coming here and saying, well, it works. Does it? It does not. Seriously, how do you measure it works? Well, 4 million people died in Rwanda under, the Belgians under the UN mandates. Yay for that. Darfur, a couple of million people died. More are dying. Janjaweed is ripping them apart. Sit down. Just getting gunned down like crazy. Yeah, we're succeeding. Of course we are. And and there's this elaborate nexus of random wars going on in Congo. The idea of the borders that were drawn by the random imperial powers no longer hold. Any army goes wherever it wants, does whatever it wants. Yes, we're definitely succeeding. I'm not a great believer in the Chinese and the Chinese leadership, but I think that I completely agree with Deng Xiaoping when he said, I don't care if it's a white cat or a black cat. As long as it catches the mouse, I'm freaking happy. So ladies and gentlemen, what is this debate about? This debate is about three very, very, very simple issues. Two issues really, and then one little bit of an appendix that the vestigial organ that hangs around. One is effective. What is effective, and what do we go with? Two, can we really build a system of accountability that we want to build? And do we have, are there harms? Are there problems? Yes, there might be problems which we, need to create a framework and manage, and we've talked about how we do that. So that's the two main things. There's third really vestigial, we love each other. We're going to be the society of nations, and what is developing countries going to think? Oh my God, I'm not able to protect this other country there. Oh my God, I suck, really? They didn't give me an opportunity to send my people in there and protect the Burundi women. Sit down. I'll deal with that in the last minute. But first, let's say effectiveness. Sit down. Effectiveness. Again, this is the thing. The two things we need to ask ourselves. Operationally, will our model work? Will it be effective versus what they put on the table? And secondly, economically, does it work? Because this whole bidding system doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. Firstly, operationally, we think it works. And the simplest analogy I can think of that is, well, the American armed forces were hiring Blackwater to protect their convoys. The American army basically thought that Blackwater did a better job protecting its convoys than the American armed forces were able to. And more in a lot of scenarios, whatever Blackwater might have been accused of doing, I don't think he's been accused of negligence in protecting those convoys, ladies and gentlemen, or protecting those installations. They work, and they've succeeded phenomenally well. The problem in a place like Iraq was basically America gave them a blank check. America said, protect these convoys at whatever cost you want. And that is the problem. The question is one of code of conduct, rules of engagement. It was America's problem, or Blackwater. So basically, the Americans told Blackwater, I don't give a shit, protect this at whatever cost. The way we're going to provide it, and OG talked about it, my first speaker talked about it, is a clear framework. There's a clear framework tied to a clear set of objectives. Your objectives is to protect these citizens, protect these aid convoys, and make sure that you do not violate human rights. I think they were not listening to that one. Hold on, I'll take you a minute. So that is the whole issue. These guys are phenomenally effective, and we've realized that. But the thing is, what we need to make sure is that there is a framework around it. There is a framework to ensure that we can hold them accountable, which I shall deal with in the bit of accountability. But then comes the issue of economically, is this viable? And I say, well, yes, it is. And we've talked about why. We've talked about how it's easier to mobilize funding from developed nations than mobilize armies. And we've talked about how you can actually say, look, you can put a dollar price tag on it. I can get these security companies to come in and protect these convoys. I'm taking him. I can protect these convoys if I have the money. And you can actually literally emotionally blackmail developed countries to say, because you didn't give me money, those people died. You can effectively raise the funds and you can effectively deploy the funds. Then came this whole beautiful thing from CEO where they said, bidding is all very, very difficult. Well, let's think about this. How does a lot of infrastructure, even defense infrastructure, in the West get done? It gets done through a bidding process via public-private partnerships. And for example, the UK built a $10 billion supertanker program for aerial refueling. What was it? It was a public-private partnership. And the way they did it is very simple. You have a set of criteria. You have to meet those criteria. Once you've met all the technical criteria of a bid, then we pick the lowest bidder. And guess what? The UN, with all its bureaucracy, is very good at doing something exactly like that, which was an entire extension which they did not even touch so far, ladies and gentlemen. And that is an issue they need to realize. So on the operational front and on the financial front, this is a model that will work, as opposed to what we have on that side. More debts, and more debts, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we have on that side. Yes.
We have a principle on this side which is beyond the physical security of people. We told you national armies engage the community, something your soldiers will not be paid bonuses for and won't do.
I agree with you. National armies engage the community. Blackwater might not be going and distributing chocolates, but tell that to the Burundian women who are getting raped. That's all I have to say. See, it's nice saying, well, I come with bells and whistles. If you don't meet the fundamental goal of being there, which is to protect these people, it doesn't matter how many bells and whistles you have. And that is something that they forgot. They said, well, there are all these wishy-washy nice things to have, but what about the fundamental thing you're supposed to be doing? Protecting these people. You're failing in that. What next? Sit down. So then it comes to this whole accountability thing, where the CEO came up and said, well, our extension is these guys are active harm, they're completely opaque, and they're essentially gun for hire. So we should not be hiring them. We've said, well, that's not true. You can hold them accountable. The way you hold private contractors accountable under the UNICEF, under the World Food Program, you make sure they don't pilfer food, you make sure they don't cheat you, you make sure they don't sell food to the enemy and stuff like that. It can be done, and we said that historically the UN is quite good at doing things like that and managing that process. So the opacity is not an issue. And then the other issue we said is, look, it's a question, we need to create framework, you need to have those checks and balances in place. And OG talked about it, which they never reported. They didn't even touch those, ladies and gentlemen. That's the thing. So the opacity and harm, all that can be managed. Most fundamentally, these are profit-driven companies. Give them an objective, give them a profit target at the back of that, and they'll meet that objective, ladies and gentlemen. It's about how you design the objective to include meeting the checks and balances, and that's something that they have not addressed on the other side. Now, sit down, you're not about it. And the thing is this, I don't understand why in security alone. If, for example, when there were all these burning oil wells in Kuwait after World War II, we didn't send in a national oil company, we sent in some of the oil majors. Why is security any different, ladies and gentlemen? And we say it should not be. Lastly, and this whole appendix of, we're this nice society of nations, in an ideal world, that would be nice. In an ideal world, countries would rescue each other. This is not an ideal world. We need to go with those words.